Hey everybody, it's Terensu here. I just thought I'd do a quick video and tell you guys what I thought about the new Castlevania Netflix series. So this thing has been in development forever. I remember hearing about this like 5 or 6 years ago, if that's short a time, maybe even longer. But the idea was that they were going to make this Castlevania series. It was going to be about the Belmonts versus Dracula, and it was going to be like the plot of Castlevania 3 like adapted or something like that. But anyway, it's finally here. It ended up being an animated series and was picked up by Netflix. And I got to give a shout out to Netflix for picking up the stuff that no one else will do. I just feel like there's so many shows that we love now that would not have been shown had it not been for Netflix. Like Stranger Things. That's me and my wife love that show. It's a great show, and it's coming back in October. But I've seen interviews with the directors, and they're like, yeah, nobody else would touch this thing. They didn't think it would sell. And once again, Netflix comes in and says, yeah, that sounds awesome. We'll give you a shot. And so I really love that about Netflix, and I hope that they, company's going to company, I've always said, but I hope that they continue to pick up series that no one else wants, or that they give shots to these stuff like Castlevania and like Stranger Things and all these other shows. Anyway, all that to say, I did watch. I watched the entire season like in one sitting. I had no intention to do that. That's actually my biggest complaint with the thing is how short it is. They really hyped this thing up so that oh, it's Castlevania, the Netflix series. So you're thinking at least 10 episodes that are an hour long, or maybe, 20 episodes or something like that. I mean, it is animated, so it takes time to draw. But the initial release is just 4 episodes long. So, it really takes that long for a series of this type of narration and style to get going. So, all you really get is it sets up what's going to be the main characters, I think, and I'm really interested to see where they go from here as far as the story. But it does feel very short, and it feels very like they were setting up for a sequel or to get renewed, which has happened. There will be a second season, so that's good. But at the same time, it still feels very short. Just as soon as you've gotten to the real meat of the story, it seems like it's over. Anyway, the series pretty much focuses on Trevor Belmont, or Ralph in the Japanese version of Castlevania 3. And the series, from what I see thus far, is setting itself up to be a retelling of Castlevania 3. So we're introduced to Trevor, who is a member of the Belmonts. And if you remember the story of Castlevania 3, the Belmonts were kind of outcast at this point because of their strange abilities. So the Wallachians had kind of pushed them to the side, said, we want nothing to do with you. And then when Dracula showed up, they reluctantly, Trevor Belmont had to take up the whip of his ancestors and go face Dracula. So that's pretty much what they're setting up here. It does very much reference Symphony of the Night. If you remember the whole plot line for that, and Dracula and his first wife, Lisa, are technically second wife, I guess, if you count Lament of Innocence as canon, which it is. His loss of Lisa is a big deal, leading to him becoming the evil, malevolent tormentor of humans that we know him to be. So the series starts off with Dracula and how he loses Lisa, just like it happened in Symphony of the Night. And it kind of sets him up to come back and terrorize Transylvania, and he does just that. In a very graphic scene. I do love that the series doesn't pull punches. It's very graphic. Definitely R-rated. You've got intestines within like 20 minutes of the show coming on or something like that. People being ripped apart. There's some violent fight scenes. It's actually not that bad. There is some quirky stuff, like when you get into the one-on-one dialogue with characters that I don't like. Like there's a scene at the very beginning that introduces Trevor Belmont, and he's in this tavern, and these guys just have this wacky conversation about some guy, like his brother-in-law or something, messing around with one of his goats. And I'm like, do we really need that scene in there? And if it's so bad that that scene is in there, but it goes on and on and on, and they just keep talking about this. And I'm like, this is about a man and his family facing an evil vampire overlord. I don't need this. get to the good stuff. That's really the series' biggest problem, I would say, is that it takes so long to get going and then it's over and you're waiting on season two, right? I guess that's a good problem to have, really, that I want to see more, but I didn't get enough in season one. That's the problem. It just kind of it's like a vapor. It's almost kind of forgettable because it doesn't really go anywhere. You're so excited to see where it's going, and there's one minor payoff that's pretty big at the end of the fourth episode, which is the last one. But it's just kind of like, oh, it's over, you know. It's like a fireworks show. It's great. It's amazing. But then it's like, okay, I won't worry about fireworks until next 4th of July. So, that's the biggest problem. As far as, being honest to the show, I mean, to the game, I really like that. You can tell that they put great effort to make this thing match the game. And because it went on to Netflix, there wasn't so much as executive meddling, I think. Because a lot of the times I think what happens with video game movies is that whoever writes it or whoever wants to do the movie has a great love and understanding for the source material, and they know how it should be presented. But the problem with getting your movie made in Hollywood is you got to go through all these focus groups and you got to go through all these board members, and they have to sign off on it for you to get the funding, unless you just like independently fund your film. That's why like movies made by Hollywood about video games are usually terrible, but you see these people who like make fan movies about Super Mario and Legend of Zelda and Metroid and all this other stuff, and it's amazing because they understand the source material, they understand why it's good, they know what people are there for. These focus groups don't always get that right. And, Netflix probably had some questions, but this thing's been in development hell for years, and Netflix has kind of pulled it out of the pond, so to speak. So good on them. You could tell there was not a lot of meddling in this. The plot proceeds almost level for level like the game. Really, it does. Like, small spoilers, Sypha Belnades is in there. And the way that Trevor meets her is exactly like it is in Castlevania 3, which was awesome. It's even the same boss monster that you fight before you meet Sypha is the exact same creature that Trevor fights before he meets her. And he rescues her under the exact same circumstances. And it's amazing. It's so cool to see that acted out, but you just don't get that, If Hollywood had made this movie, it would have been some stupid stuff like Trevor was... he was Trevor Belmont, and he was like a mighty cage fighter warrior barbarian who came from the mountains to rescue Sypha, his beloved, who had been kidnapped. And, Alucard was like Dracula's cousin who wanted to see him beat up. Something stupid like that goes nowhere. But this is what Konami, good Konami, before they went crazy, this is what good Konami made as the Castlevania 3 story, and they're transferring it into film. Now they've added elements into it to flesh out backstories that the game doesn't go into, and they did a good job with that. For example, they explain why Sypha has her powers. They explain what group of people she hangs out with. They account for the her pretending to be a man thing. I mean, it adds depth to these things. It fills in blanks that the game didn't, but it does it in such a way that the source material is not disrespected. So it's very believable. It fits. You say, yeah, that could make sense within the confines of the Castlevania universe. It does that. The plot, like I said, it is Castlevania 3. There is this whole subplot with corrupt church officials, which I didn't really care for because... And it's not just being a Christian that I don't like it. Like I understand during that time there's massive amounts of corruption in the Catholic Church and lots of things like that. But in the Castlevania series, the church has always been the good guys. Even like if we look at some of the last canonical entries in Castlevania, like Castlevania Area of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow, the church includes members like Yoko Belnades and like Charlotte All-In who use magic. But they're not burned at the stake, and they're not convicted of being witches. They actively use their power with the church to defeat Dracula. And in the series, Dracula has always been strongly opposed by the church. Like in Castlevania 64, they send Henry in to rescue children. And they've just, regardless of how you feel about the church and all that in real life, the church in the Castlevania series has always been the good guys. They've always fought Dracula. They, at least in the later games, always worked with the Belmonts because they understood the importance of using them to fight Dracula. They did. And this series, you can't really tell if it wants to portray the church as bad guys and if it's trying to make some sort of social message, or if it's just like a standard, Trevor Belmont is God's champion to defeat Dracula, and the church is just too blinded by their own ambitions to see it. Or is it all just the fault of the corrupt bishop? It can't really decide where it wants to go with that. In some scenes you have, for example, you'll have Trevor, and he kind of talks about like, oh, the old gods and the old culture here in Wallachia, and he kind of talks like that was better, the church shouldn't have thrown it apart. But then you have some scenes where, they mention God, like as in the Western New God, I guess, the Western God, which Wallachia would have adapted, and they mention that, and Trevor's okay with it, and he acts like, oh, I believe this. So you can't really tell where Trevor falls. Is he skeptical of the church? Does he just not like the corrupt church in Wallachia? You don't really know. The whole subplot kind of falls away, though, because the main church antagonist is ripped apart, fairly early. I think it's like in the third or fourth episode he gets just disemboweled, and that's pretty much the end of that. But it can't really decide where it wants to go as far as the church. Is the church a villain? Is it not a villain? Who knows? They haven't really decided yet. That being said, there was not a whole lot of Dracula either. The church was really the only kind of villain role, the corrupt bishop. He was really the only one. I would have liked to have seen more of Dracula. Now, obviously, he's the one sending these horrible monsters out, disemboweling people, but we don't really ever see Dracula. We just, he's mentioned and people talk about him, but we don't ever really see him, other than in like the first episode. So I hope that we get to see more of Dracula. Originally they said the series was going to be kind of like Game of Thrones. Well, regardless of who you consider the villain to be in Game of Thrones, you get to see all the parties and what they're doing. So, Dracula in this animation doesn't strike me as the type of guy who's just aimlessly sitting in his castle waiting to be slain. Like, I think there's things happening here. So I hope that the season 2 will go back and forth. So we'll get some Trevor episodes and some Dracula episodes and some episodes focusing on different characters. Conspicuously absent is Grant Dynasty, the pirate wall-climbing hero from Castlevania 3. I don't know if they're going to introduce him or not. He certainly could fit in there somehow. I just think that storyline-wise, Sypha and Alucard are probably way more important to the story, just by nature of who Alucard is, and Sypha because her and Trevor eventually get married and continue the Belmont line, and that infuses the Belmonts with lots and lots of magic power to make them even stronger. Whereas Grant he's just kind of there. They could take the Castlevania Judgment plot line, which is, Grant, he likes Sypha too, and so he competed with Trevor for her affections in that game. So maybe they could work something with that. I think that would be a very interesting angle to throw in there and have like, here's Trevor and here's Grant, and they're working towards a common goal. But secretly, Grant, it's eating him up because he wants Sypha too. And he feels like that he doesn't have a chance against him, and maybe that tempts him a little bit, and maybe Dracula plays on that fear. That would have to be a while into the series to make that really work, but I think that would be interesting, and it would be a good angle to put in there, just to see where it goes. I mean, my goodness, if Emma Swan in Once Upon a Time can end up with Captain Hook, surely the whole Grant Sypha plotline love triangle thing could be worked in. Anyway, overall, Castlevania looks like it's headed in the right direction. As a big fan of the original series and someone who's been looking forward to this since they announced it, although I was a little skeptical, I will say I am at the very moment I am pleased with the series. I'm somewhat surprised they managed to do it as well as they did. Excuse me, but it's amazing what you can do without corporate meddling. Anyway, that's my kind of take on Castlevania. What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below what you thought about it. I hope that you get a chance to check it out if you're a Castlevania fan. I hope you liked it. I'm looking forward to Season 2. Excuse me, I've got the hiccups for some reason. Anyway, leave a comment and a like if you like the video. If you don't like it, well, that's too bad. You'll just have to hit dislike. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.